Ladies and gentlemen, of all of the episodes that we have done, I hope that you get to see this episode in video. If not, for those that are just listening, I have to describe this to you. I'm talking to my friend Amiad Cohen, and he is a prominent MAGA conservative here in Israel, Make Israel Great Again, and runs one of the most important conservative groups. But the setting for our interview is he's in his IDF uniform. He's at a base in the north of Israel on the border. And what a lot of people don't know is that unlike America, where we have an all-volunteer force, in Israel, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are in the army, and people are in reserves for a very, very long time. I'm not going to give away your age, Mr. Cohen, but you're no spring chicken, and like me. And so people will be surprised to know that the IDF is made up of regular folks, kind of like the United States military during World War II, where everybody was involved. There's a kind of World War II feeling in Israel, and has been since really essentially since 1948, because it's been one continuous war interrupted by a few bouts of peace. So with that introduction, Mr. Cohen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So what, let me ask you, how long usually I want to begin at the beginning of your story, but how long have you been in the Army?
I joined the Army in 2001, spent 4 years in a special unit called anti-guerrilla unit, specializing in explosives, demolition. And I've been in reserve since 2005. Till today, in several units. I'm a major today, running the command and control front unit of the 9th Brigade.
And you're on an extended tour of duty at this point, correct?
Yeah. So since October 7th, this is approximately my 300th day in reserves since October 7th, fighting across the northern border from the Golan Heights and the Hermon Mountain till the west and the sea in Rosh Hanikra, across the border, being in battle, very interesting events in the past year.
And give us the quick, if you could, give us the quick bio on yourself. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Et cetera, et cetera. Would love to know.
Born in Israel, raised in Israel, spent a couple of years in a very young age in South Africa. But aside of that, raised in Israel, never finished high school. Studied in Yeshiva a year before the IDF, 4 years in the IDF, studied in Yeshiva for 4 years after. And since then, I've been involved in local government. I have a security company, perimeter security, planning sophisticated radars, cameras, and air bases, army bases, borders, things like that we plan. Involved in some other investments, real estate, and high tech. And in the past decade, or basically a decade ago, I started what used to be called Tikva Israel. Today it's called Cherut, the Center for Israeli Liberty. It's unfortunately, only one, but I hope others will join, a conservative educational think tank in Israel, trying to educate the next generation of conservative leaders for the state of Israel, introducing the Israeli public to intellectual conservative ideas, from free markets to national security to judiciary, to, let's say, the academic political science perspective of it, across the intellectual world, publishing magazines, translating books, having a small academia of our own institution, that we have like 150 students a year, and many other ventures that we have in Cherut. Married, 6 kids, live in Italy.
So back to your organization, could we say that it is maybe, in American terms, kind of like Heritage meets the America First Policy Institute, kind of a combination of both?
So it's a combination of the FedSoc heritage, America First-ish, some kind of national security Hudson style. So yes, it's a combination of many um, think tanks that you have in America. Unfortunately, in one institution because of the lack of conservative ideas in Israel.
Okay.
Think about Israel as a post-Soviet country. That the academic world, that when I say this to Americans, they get it. We don't have Adam Smith in Hebrew yet in full length. So think about an intellectual world that lacks the core, most important intellectual in economics in the past 300 years. And the universities in Israel didn't see the importance of translating it in full length to Hebrew. We have only the first third of Wealth of Nations and nothing from the theory of moral sentiment. So expand that to the rest of the academic world, which every uncoherent French postmodern thinker was translated 3, 4 times, and the classical intellectual conservative thinkers are unknown.
Okay, so I'm going to try something here. I've never said this publicly, and I want to get your feedback. So, America was the founders of America based America on the ancient Hebrew Republic from the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible. That was their motto. And so, in some sense, could it be said that that traditional America can teach modern Israel how to be like ancient Israel?
Mm. Okay, this is a tricky question and it needs to be very accurate how to answer it. The
Okay. Okay.
answer is in some ways definitely yes. Um, since the Jewish people were exiled in the year 70, almost 2,000 years ago, we forgot to think about how to run a country, how to run our own governance. Thank God the Christian tradition during, let's say, the second millennium was invested in thinking about that from Fortescue to Locke, from Thomas Aquinas to others. We're taking the Bible and trying to think and take out governance ideas and actually trial and error in their own
Yeah. Yeah.
kingdoms and to try that. And we can learn from the experience of states and countries that tried the original biblical strategies of governance. And I think that the Americans are the best representation of that on, let's say, how you run a country. But the Jewish people in actually every country has a different, the second part of running a country is the why, is the moral, let's say,
Yes.
identity. Here it differs a little bit America to Israel. So Israel has its own Jewish Israeli identity for why the culture, the tradition of the country, but in how to run a country, definitely the American model and the American founding fathers are definitely a very good example for how to do it.
Could it not be argued that the sort of core foundational reasons for America and the core foundations reasons for Israel are actually highly compatible in the sense that both countries were started by people who wanted to have the freedom to worship God. Let's be very specific, not faith in general, to worship God in a way that they had been prevented from doing so previously. In that Jews were running from predominantly Europe at the time, and the founders of America were actually running from the old world to the new world. You know, most famously, the Pilgrims moved from from England to Holland, spent some time in Holland, and you know, in some sense, very similar whys. We were talking about the difference in the what, but and commonalities in the what. But I think if you agree that the connective tissue between the two countries is a shared why.
Definitely, the idea of Exodus is a idea that the founding fathers and let's say the immigrants from the old Europe to the new continent definitely had came with that story. And actually, I envy their deep connection to the what they call the Old Testament, what we call the Bible, as an identity, an idea, and a religious and national perspective to how they decide to live their life and let's say the national way of living. It's definitely the common idea between the two. Um, the Bible, the Torah, the Old Testament is it's a human question of being um, slaved by many external powers, and as an individual and a society to choose to become like separated and liberated from these forces, and trying to establish the ideal place for people to be free and worshiping God. I think the state of Israel definitely has a story, and America has. That's the common story between the two, and it's the Judeo-Christian story that is coming around. And definitely, you can see today that the countries who are connected to the story are the countries who represent the West and who will survive this postmodern era. And if you neglect these original stories, these archetypes that give people a meaning for their life, so you get countries with no national identity, with no families, with no religion, and actually with no future.
Let's talk about the West. We are in a civilizational, first of all, one word answer, yes or no. We are in a civilizational battle. West, the idea of Western civilization versus everything else. Agree or disagree?
Disagree. It's the Judeo-Christian one against the rest.
Okay. So in that battle, first of all, we're not using the word battle metaphorically. You are in your IDF uniform. You are in your unit. First of all, can you help us understand in your life what's happening on a macro level in your part of the Middle East? And then I want to talk about micro level. And then I'd like to talk about, to the degree that you could talk about that. And then I'd like to talk about the macro level.
So in the micro level here up in the north, many things changed since a year and a half ago. We still have a threat from Hezbollah, but the difference between the threat that we had a year and a half ago, the second we took our head up, we were attacked by guided missiles, rockets, and drones. Today, Hezbollah is totally disarmed from the southern part of Lebanon. Their leadership is destroyed, killed, eliminated. Their command and control structure is totally destroyed. So on that aspect, the northern part of Israel is, in the meantime, in some kind of ceasefire. Unfortunately, we did not dismantle Hezbollah totally, and they did not surrender, which we should have done. And I argued for that very often publicly. But these are decisions have been made already, and now they're trying to rebuild, but it will take them 10 to 15 years. Strategically, Israel collapsed the firewall that Iran tried to surround us with, from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon to Gaza. The battle in Gaza and all these battles still have time to, let's say, get to a climax and end with some kind of surrender. But we passed the tipping point. Hamas is on its way to decline and to end, and is not an existential threat anymore in Israel. In the south, the Palestinians are deterred inside Judea and Samaria. Hezbollah is deterred and half destroyed. And in the Golan Heights, there's no Hezbollah, and the Sunnis there, El Julani, following Trump's trip today, understand that Israel is a powerful force, and they will not try to attack us in the next 10, 15 years. So today, looking at the border today, it's a little bit boring. There's some kind of attempts of Hezbollah to rebuild, but it's very limited.
Let's talk about this, actually. The president yesterday in his speech in Saudi Arabia mentioned specifically wanting to rebuild Lebanon. Is that something that can be done? Do you have hope for a non-Hezbollah run Lebanon? Is that a realistic goal?
Depends on the strength of the minorities in Lebanon. Lebanon is a fragmented society with Shia, Sunnis, Druze, and Maronites who are trying to fight each other and try to rebalance themselves. Israel weakening Hezbollah dramatically opened an opportunity for them to dismantle Hezbollah. I doubt the chances for that to happen, but it's very good to start and try that. I see that Lebanon needs to be broken down to 5 different local federation of 5 different countries or small, like parts of it that will be separated in some ways. That's the long term of the Middle East. So yes, it's a good thing to try. I doubt it will be successful in the long run because the Shiites are the biggest minority in Lebanon today.
Okay. So now if we could go to the macro level, first of all, and I want to get into the MAGA movement, Make Israel Great Again movement as we walk through here. So you understand America first, obviously, and Israel has an Israel first, I think an Israel first orientation. Often those things are compatible. For example, what's going on in Iran, neither country can stand for a nuclear weapon, an Iranian nuclear weapon. Looking at the strategic alliance between, you have a conservative government in both countries now, and looking at that alliance and then looking at the president's trip thus far, what's your read on where we are? Can you help us interpret what we're seeing and help us understand the impact on both countries?
Yes, let's start from the beginning. Israel has some kind of tension between two forces. One force trying Israel to be a client of America, which is very comfortable to the Americans, and one part is trying to be an independent state as an ally to America. And these things can't come together. So I need to be clear to all the listeners of this podcast. Israel should never ask anyone else to fight its battles. Israel doesn't need to ask anyone to fund its wars, and Israel doesn't need anyone to do anything for it without its full interest. Relationship between countries are out of total interest. Trump is the president of the United States and Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel, and each leader needs to take care of its own country. Now, a successful Israel is an American interest. I mean, an independent, strong Israel, if you look globally, worldwide, America needs an ally that will be strong and destroy its enemies in the Middle East to stabilize the Middle East, and that's an American interest. And not for American troops to run the Middle East, but actually Israeli troops sitting in the border between Iraq and Iran as a local empire. We call it Pax Israeliana, like the Middle Eastern peace in with all these Arab countries based on the strength of the state of Israel, not dependent on the United States military force. Saying that as an Israeli interest, and we're trying to, let's say, offer it to the Israeli government and try to promote these ideas and these concepts to the Israeli government. I think post the Biden administration, people are more open to these ideas.
Yeah.
Netanyahu just argued we need to stop taking the American military support. I don't want American money. It's 0.76% of Israeli GDP. It's a waste of diplomatic capital for a small amount of money. We don't want that. We don't need it. And America doesn't want Israel to get that. America needs to rethink the Israeli-American relationship. Now, if you look at the broader perspective about the Middle East, Trump is coming to the Middle East and trying to break alliances that are outcome of weakness. The Iranian-Saudi Arabia relationship started the second America showed weakness. Other relationships came out of strength. When Israel was strong and had a good relationship with America in the previous Trump administration, the Emirates came to Israel and had the Abraham Accords. When we're weak, our people who are sitting on the fence trying to understand what's their interest, they go to our enemies to go with them because they can't trust us to help them with their battles and fights. So Trump is trying to shake the boat and see who's the strongest man standing. And if you're strong, if you're capable, if you're willing to pay the price for your strength and for your country's success, you will be an ally of Trump. And if you're weak and needy and always asking for help and support and waiting for permission, you will not be Trump's friend, an American friend, because America needs to rely on its partners and allies. And it can't be, if you're a client and you need our support, you're not important. And that's where America is coming now to the Middle East. It's Iran, it's Saudi Arabia, and it's definitely a question about Turkey, Syria, and Israel. If Israel had a decisive victory in this war, Trump would have addressed Israel differently. And now we have an opportunity. Trump is offering a relationship between Israel and Syria. Israel was very blunt about our actions in Syria. It was very clear what we did. For the audience that maybe doesn't know, we actually occupied territory inside Syria today, protecting the Druze in front of the ISIS leadership of Syria. Now, when we're strong, Trump is coming and saying, Giuliani, accept that Israel is protecting the Jews, and now you can come with having some normalization with Israel, understanding Israel is strong. But if you look at the Hamas, Trump is looking at Israel failing to take over Hamas. He's trying to push them to kick out the Gazans out of Gaza. And he says, oh, you're not doing anything, so I will take responsibility on the problem there now. So everywhere Israel is weak, Trump is coming in and trying to solve the problem. And everywhere Israel is strong, he's coming and offering Israel a very good solution.
And this is first of all, I mean, this is fascinating because this is, again, the philosophy of the MAGA movement, Make Israel Great Again movement, which is stand strong, just like America is standing strong right now. And I want to key in on one thing that you focused on. One of the reasons that that America gives military aid to Israel is to prevent Israel from becoming a competitor. Case in weaponry. Case in point, Israel made its own fighter plane back in the day, and America said, no, you got to stop that. If we're going to be friends, you're going to buy American planes, you're going to stop making your own planes. So I want to be clear on this because people think Israel came to America with their hat in their hand saying, please give us money. And America has strategic interests why it has wanted Israel to be a client and not a partner. Now, given that, I want you to express to me from the MAGA and the MAGA perspectives why Israel needs to, you mentioned something that Bibi Netanyahu had spoken about, the fact that Israel needs to get rid of taking military aid from America. So from those two perspectives, when we say that, how quickly, how aggressively do you think Israel would need to do that? And then we as America, how do you think we as America would respond?
So there's another deal that's supposed to be signed next year in, I think, 2026, post the previous one that Obama signed for a 10 years grant of 3.5, I think that's the number, $billion annually. Remember in the 70s when he signed this deal, it was 15% of Israelis' GDP. Today, as I said, it's 0.76. So it's a very small amount of money today. Now, we need to add another point for American interest here. Israel was fighting the 73 war. And actually, the end of the 73 war ended with an Israeli victory. We surrounded the Egyptian Third Army and on the way to surround the Second Army and actually have a very, very decisive, clear victory against the Egyptian army and Egypt. And Kissinger came and told Israel that it cannot have a decisive victory because of the American interest to prevent the third World War with Russia, with the Soviet Union then. So we should not win and destroy the Third Army, and they will reimburse us in some ways with military support. That's part of the story. So America is trying to force its interest on local conflicts and prevent us from winning and deterring our enemies and having a clear victory. We're paying a price till today because we're unwilling to win a clear victory on our enemies and still having them standing on their feet. Israel needs to come before the next negotiation that will happen. It's already happening now and needs to come next year. And come and tell America, thank you very much. Let's put $3.5 billion you will put, and Israel will invest $3.5 billion too in a joint military R&D fund that will invest in both countries in military technologies. There will be a joint Israeli-American board that will run this portfolio company. That's one way to address it. I think the challenges for doing something like that is mostly actually the American jury. Being a little bit blunt, many American Jews have an interest of having Israel being more a client than an independent state. And it gives them political leverage on Israel in some ways, and it gives them power. And a weak, needy Israel is in many, let's say, parts of American Jewry and interest. And the last time in '96, when Netanyahu came and asked to stop the funding, the American military aid, actually, let's say, political Jewish groups prevented that from happening. Because a strong Israel is an independent strong Israel, is some kind of threat of political groups in America that can strong arm Israel in many ways. So that's one of the challenges for that to happen. I think the MAGA movement has an interest for that to stop and will respect and appreciate a strong Israel. So there's a way to make that happen. I think the more Israel insists on that we don't want that. We want to buy our weapons. We will offer you our weapons, but we want to have an equal partnership and alliance and not a one-way ticket from America giving Israel. Everyone has an interest for that to happen. Most of the people, not everyone.
I was going to ask you what I don't know if you've seen any polls on this, but what would be your read on the Israeli population's perspective on such a policy proposal?
I think the left in Israel do hate it because the left in Israel or the left in the world think that an external force that can leverage Israeli politics is a good thing. The globalists, people on the left believe we have to respect the international institutions, which is an anti-national philosophical perspective. So the left in Israel will want Israel to continue and take this money, and that's part of the political debate in Israel is proven to be like that. The Labour Party is totally for continuing to take that money, and the right that wants to have a strong independent country is for stopping the funding.
Okay, well that's absolutely fascinating, and that's something that people have not heard of. And it's interesting that you say this. I know some folks who watch public opinion very closely, and they said that since October 7th, Israel's high watermark, and this was surprising to me, was the Hezbollah pager incident. People around the world were very impressed by that, and it's evidenced by what you said. It's when Israel shows itself strong and authentically the children and grandchildren of King David, rather than other figures in our history. The world may not agree with Israel or even like Israel, but the world will respect Israel for its strength and particularly allies like America, correct?
Right. International affairs is a utilitarian moral structure. Personal relationships, like your family, is more Kantian in a perspective that what you want and like your attitude and approach towards things. But we respect, it's a Hobbesian world in international affairs, and you need to respect the strong, and you will respect the strong. And basically, a strong and wealthy country can do almost everything at once. Now, we need to have internally our moral compass, and I think Israel is a light into the nations to how morally it addresses many let's say, challenges that a country in war has. And I think that Israel can come with clean hands towards any international court who will question Israeli actions in war. But that's not the question. We're being judged because of our weakness addressing these challenges towards the world and arguing for our moral justification to fight these wars, and not because the lack of moral actions running the war.
Let me take us back to the map, to the broader picture for a moment. We were earlier discussing Lebanon and the President Trump's current trip. At the time of this recording, he's visiting Qatar. We'll talk about that in a minute. But can you sort of tell us what you see as Trump's vision for the Middle East? And then I'd also like to ask you Bibi's vision for the Middle East and where you think those two visions converge.
Trump, again, this is a theory that I'm coming with, but I think it's based on a lot of evidence. Trump is trying to do one thing in this presidency, to prevent the Third World War with China. That's his goal. Everything is aligned to that trajectory in everything that he does today. Part of it is breaking all all the evil Axis alliances that he has. It's Iran, it's Russia, it's North Korea. So North Korea is a little bit more complicated, but definitely Russia and Iran. He's trying to take them away from Iran. That's one thing. And the second thing is building a strong industry and army that will be capable to deter China from fighting a war with America and trying to invade Taiwan. So that's the tariffs and the industry question about America, Canada, and Mexico. But the outcome towards the Middle East is I don't have munitions, money, attention to invest in your local nonsense. So you need to be quiet, kids, and play nice. That's his approach towards the Middle East. Either there's one bully running the place that I can trust him, or I will need to force all of you to play nice together. I think the first 3 months were more towards Israel. Get your act together and take care of the Middle East and give me some peace and quiet. And if you don't, I will come and take care of it for you. I think we failed in the first 3 months. There are good excuses for Netanyahu to fail. We can go inside the domestic issues and internal governance issues we have in our parliamentary system to run the real army. But these are the excuses. The bottom line, we got an opportunity to take care of Gaza, got an opportunity to take care of other things that we did not. And we are not. And Trump came and said, I don't have time for your nonsense. I'll force everyone to play nice together now. Netanyahu's perspective is, I want to take Iran, but I want to be as risk averse as possible and have to do it totally aligned with Trump. Trump doesn't want to attack Iran, but he will be open for an Israeli initiative. And that's actually a conflict between Trump and Netanyahu. So Israel needs to prove itself as independent and being a little bit rude and capable and attacking Iran without American support or initiative. And Trump is, in some ways, in my understanding, looking for Israel to be strong and having more initiative. And Netanyahu is actually trying for the opposite. And that's where the strategies contradict a little bit. Netanyahu is known to be a risk-averse leader. He doesn't take risks. He doesn't, definitely as a conservative leader, he doesn't try to start wars by himself. And the lack of the elite support in Israel, and it's not the support of the people, it's support of the elites in Israel and the deep state, he has a real problem to lead towards more complicated strategies that he would like to. So he's stuck in some kind of limbo. I hope that in the next month or two, Israel will attack Iran in some ways, style a Patriot attack. I hope it will happen. I believe the probability of that happening is 50% in the next couple of months, specifically in the next 60 days. I believe it can happen. The only reason it won't happen is because Trump will put a red light for that and stop it.
Okay. So we have I'm thinking of trying to define this a little bit by the major issues we're looking at. So we're looking at Iran. There's kind of a disconnect well, is there a disconnect on Iran? Because do you think that Netanyahu and Trump agree on the level of the threat? Do you think that they are both equally serious about Iran not having a nuclear weapon?
I think the one question is the timeline. Israel has the pressure of time, which Trump doesn't have the pressure of time as Israel does. Israel feels, first of all, Israel has elections in a year and a half from now. So Netanyahu will need to address that challenge till then, if he wants to address it. He wants to get normalization with Saudi till then. He wants to come to elections with that. In next March of 26, we will have the next budget needs to be passed, and the chances of that passing is very low. So it will topple down his government. He will not be able to attack Iran with as a lame duck in that period. So Netanyahu has a very limited time to attack Iran. Put that, the exhaustion of the military fighting in Gaza and fighting in Lebanon, and so he cannot have the reserves waiting until he attacks Iran to prevent an unintended consequence of the attack from maybe Jordan. You never know who's going to attack us the following day. So Netanyahu has a time limit, and Trump less so. He doesn't care to do it in a month, a year from now, a year and a half from now. He doesn't have these calculations.
And Trump actually tweeted a few weeks ago that any attack on Iran would in fact be led by Israel. What you're saying is that push is going to come to shove on this issue. So my question, if I may, is then why do you think America would negotiate directly with Iran and not loop Israel into those negotiations?
Again, because Trump is trying to solve problems without a war. He doesn't believe in military force. He will always, and he says it very clearly, I prefer a deal. I don't believe we will get a deal. I don't trust the Iranians, but I'm coming very open to negotiation to try to force you down. Now, remember, the American political structure is very smart, and Senate is part of the international affairs and will have to sign a deal to be involved in some kind of international deal with Iran. And the Senate is very pro, or let's say against Iran, pro-Israel in that question, not as Trump, squishy. So the political tensions inside America will force America to be much more military involved in Iran. Again, an initiative from Israel will push America inside this conflict in some ways. And that's, again, a conflict because we don't want America to fight our wars. So if I imagine, or trying to articulate for the listeners how it's going to look like, I think it will be more similar to the pager attack than an airstrike, the first round of it. I think the goal of Israel's attack will be to topple down the Iranian regime. Just to give you a sense, the intelligence, from my understanding, is there's 20% support of the Iranian regime inside Iran. So you need to create many forces inside Iran to go against the government on one hand, and you need to push the government down. Now, there's a very, very big shortage of water now in Iran, a shortage of electricity and power. They have a lot of issues, domestic issues, that are threatening and jeopardizing the regime. And if Israel comes in a sophisticated way and pushes it down, and then the second layer of attack will be the airstrike, it will change domestic events inside Iran to topple down the government eventually. I think that will be the chain of events, much more than a clear one-time attack of destroying the nuclear facilities. I think nuclear facilities will be the second cycle of attack and not the first one.
How do you see all this shaking out in terms of reshaping the Middle East vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia, Qatar, so on and so UAE, so on and so on?
So I need a little bit of history here is important. The countries we know in the Middle East today are an outcome of the Sykes-Picot agreements from the 1916-17 post the First World War, that the Brits and the French divided this area into borders and appointed minorities to run majorities. A dictatorship of 20% of the population running 80-90% of the population. So that's Lebanon, that's Syria, that's Tunisia, that's Libya, that's Egypt, that's Jordan, Saudi Arabia, that's Bahrain. Like, all these countries are an outcome of an empire trying to appoint puppet governments to help them. The problem with these things happened in 2008 when the people started to rise against these dictatorships and to fragmentize these countries. So Syria is a failed state, Lebanon is a failed state, Jordan is on the way to be a failed state, Egypt had its own riots and it's still forced by a small minority of military government, Iran is the same thing, Iraq is a failed state. If you look at the Middle East, it's a lot of tribal minorities fighting to gain power on a government and a state that no one identifies under that national identity. There's no Iraqis. There's tribes, Shiites and Sunnis fighting each other with the Kurds. It's a more tribal society and tradition and religion than a nation one that the empires tried to force them 100 years ago. So the real outcome of the Middle East that eventually will happen, because that's the material, is a lot of small local states. Iraq will fragmentize into many states. Syria is already there. Lebanon is on that way. Jordan's a little bit different, but it's the same idea. Egypt is not so, and Iran will get to that place too. Iran is 7 different tribes and communities and nationalists and religions sitting in different areas, and there's no real central Iran government that they identify as. That's the end game. The Saudis and the Emirates as the Sunni countries are too wealthy to fall in the meantime. But eventually they have no real incentive to go against Israel if Israel is a strong military force in the area. So I believe on the very short term, the Abraham Accords will expand to Saudi Arabia, will be very simple, and we call it the Indo-Atlantic strategy, from India to Morocco. If you look at the map, a little bit different than the Far East and the Middle East, think about from India, an industry center with 1.4 billion people, to Morocco. That's an area that is it's an Eastern, in the Muslim, Arab, Indo, much more related than the Chinese, Eastern net, and the Europeans and the Americans. So putting all these groups together, I think I see a lot of transportation industry collaboration between these countries in the future. The one threat for all these countries is the Muslim Brotherhood. So if we're moving now and taking down the Iranian strategic jihadist threat, the next one will rise is the Muslim Brotherhood. We can see that with Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and all the small, quiet, underground Muslim Brotherhood that is waiting for the opportunity. So smart leader internationally with Trump connected to a strong Israel will try to build commerce, economic relationship from India to Morocco with normalization with as many Arab countries as possible, and fighting the common enemy, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, in the next 15, 20 years.
Okay, now I'd like to, in our kind of closing moments, talk about the bad guys, quote unquote, the bad guys. There's a lot of bad guys in the Middle East. It's a rough neighborhood. It's like South Chicago. But two specific ones, Qatar and Turkey. Because, even if we deal with the Iran situation, you've got two very challenging countries in those two countries, one with jihadist ambitions, one with actual empiric, I don't know what the word would be, empire ambitions. Can you get into how those two countries, Turkey and Qatar, factor into the chess game that's being played right now?
Trump is the smartest actor in the world today. It's a failed state with 300,000 people, with an endless bank account, running the world.
You said Qatar. You said Qatar. Qatar is the smartest actor. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Qatar. Qatar is the smartest actor in the world today, playing both sides. But if you take over, look what's under the hood, it's a Muslim Brotherhood jihadist, crazy Sunni Muslim country that is gaining power by money. I think the Trump deal with the crazy $400 million airplane is a representation of their strategy. And the lack of clarity in this utilitarian international affairs world. So Trump's argument is let's take the money, who cares? But if you understand in depth, ideas matter. So trying to balance these two things is very complicated. Qatar is buying universities, buying many entities in the world, and giving and helping Israel negotiating for the hostages, but it doesn't care for the Israeli interest, and it doesn't care for the Western interest. It's trying to survive as a small country, and looking forward for the end of carbon energy in the next 50 years. They're trying to build their political power stronger and stronger by buying more and more entities. But that's the real threat to the Western world, and that's Qatar. Turkey is another actor that will rise only when Iran falls. So that's, again, going back to the balance. The second Iran falls, a Shia jihadist country, there will be an opening for another country to rise, a Sunni one, now a jihadist one. But there's one thing that everyone understands that will influence Turkey in the future, in the short term, medium, long term world, is birth rates. The Turkish economy and birth rates are collapsing, and that's a challenge for Turkey. I think if you look forward about all these countries, in the next 20 to 30 years, everything's going to change because of birth rates. Iran has a big problem of Iranians, the core Persians' birth rates. Same thing with the Turks in Turkey. That will influence a lot of decision making in the next 30 years when the financial structure of these countries will change. And that's where Qatar is the most dangerous one in the world. Trying to look forward how to solve these issues only by strong military strength in the Western countries. And another thing that will be, let's say, rising in the next decades, it's already a question. Europe already failed totally by having a strong moral national identity, and that's where America and Israel come together. The only two countries in the world with a Western democratic governance on one hand, but with a very traditional religious micro decision making of the people and having a real identity, a real national identity, are Israel and America and the United States. Israel more and better than the American one, but ideas and cultures matter. And to fight the in money and the let's say the bribery of Qatar as moral countries, Israel and America, going back to the beginning of our conversation, as the two Exodus biblical countries, I think investing in that world is something we need to do tomorrow morning. And that's where Netanyahu and Trump comes together. Netanyahu and Trump are two utilitarian leaders who care about the outcome and don't care about the culture and tradition. The next American president and the next Israeli prime minister will have to address these cultural challenges. That's where countries are going to fail. In 20 years, you and I will be over 60. That means our generation is, let's say, too old. And the next generation will come. And the question is how many people and how many families? And that's the most important thing, where countries will sustain and survive and thrive. So if you're asking me for what's the tipping point for the West, go back to your original core identities. And that's the only thing will let you fight and have the power to build a country and fight against the evil jihadist or the nihilist secular world.
You know, you have caused me now to revise my previous statement, Your Honor. So let me throw this one at you. Okay, I said before that traditional America can teach modern Israel how to be like ancient Israel. Okay, that was my first theory. Based on what you just said, now I got to think about how to say this correctly. Modern Israel can in kind teach traditional America how to be, or actually to teach America how to be like traditional America. In other words, Israel is actually trending more religious. Israel is trending more towards its identity. Israel is trending more towards America's and Israel's original vision. America has been falling away, has this moment right now of a kind of a revival of that. And in that revival could look to Israel actually to find its authentic soul, its authentic neshama. And so the point is that the U.S.-Israel alliance is not a client-vassal situation. It's two partners in the world put together by God who, when they're rowing in the same direction, no kind of evil can stand in their way. And that's what you've taught me in this episode. Does that summarize it well?
In a short sentence, Israel has a very healthy society and a very sick political system. America has a very healthy political system and, let's say, declining culture and society. I think if we learn from each other, Israel learning from America how to build a very strong political system, and America looking towards Israel to accept and understand the importance of the culture and tradition, I think both countries will gain a strategic asset for the next decades of the future of these two countries.
Amiad, thank you for that. Very inspiring. Obviously, God bless America. God bless Israel. God bless you and your family. Thank you for what you're doing up in the north to protect the people of Israel and the peace-loving people of the world. And I'm going to absolutely insist that we do this again when you come back from your reserve duty.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again and your time. Thank you.